I'm just thinking, the lockdown, there's been very few psychedelic orgies recently, and how many people are just waiting to be able to go out and express themselves in that way again. And I love hearing you talk about eroticism and expression like that, Miriam. And I think it's such an authentic expression of the self when you can be so present with your desires and your expressions, and be somewhere where you have permission to really, where people really see that and accept that. It can be tremendously healing and powerful and life affirming. And most people I know who've done a lot of psychedelics have dabbled in some form of non-conformist sexual kind of practices. What do you think, James?
I wonder about that. I wonder, like, do psychedelics make you polyamorous? And I think there's a question like, is somebody who's more likely to be polyamorous more likely to take psychedelics? Or is psychedelics, does it make you more likely to be polyamorous? Or do psychedelics, on a fundamental level, change our tendencies, cultural tendencies towards monogamy? Or do psychedelics take and break down the walls of guilt and shame and sort of reactivity and I think Bruce's term is false self, although I apologize if I've gotten that wrong. And then underneath, there's the realization that one has always been polyamorous, or is just more open to different types of sexual experiences. So I wonder if it's like, is it like chicken or the egg, as to whether or not psychedelics make people more likely to want to have wild, interesting, dynamic experiences, or people who are more likely to want to have wild, interesting, dynamic experiences are more likely to take psychedelics?
Yes,
I mean,
the answer.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I may be the only non-polyamorous person on this panel. I don't know, but it may be a function of age. But like, I'm one of those people who like experienced that I found a soulmate and had no interest actually in. I mean, like, this is my beloved. And that was before I started into the psychedelic path, and I've done a lot of psychedelics since. And it hasn't aroused in me the desire to be polyamorous. So, the mind is a powerful thing. Like, and I don't think psychedelics override the mind necessarily. I've been with people who, have taken 600 micrograms of LSD and we're just holding a conversation like this. And so I'm not sure that psychedelics, that's an interesting conversation in itself. Mm-hmm. What is the interaction between, quote unquote, our minds and the psychedelic substance? Obviously psychedelics just open us to what's already there. My experiences of many psychedelic journeys has not been that I've felt like I want to be polyamorous.
I think maybe I'll jump back in and like, I have had a history of being polyamorous, and I think, my psychedelic exploration and my exploration of different relational organizing structures sort of were hand in hand with each other. And I think that psychedelics helped me be more radical in the choices that I was making, and in that more likely towards polyamory. But I think that was something I was already interested in and already wanting to go towards. And psychedelics maybe just helped me own it more. But it was also a very particular psychedelic experience I had with psilocybin that showed me that at one point I realized oh, I have great polyamorous relationships right now. I feel sexually satisfied in a very dynamic and interesting multitude of ways with different people, and it's all going really well, and I have a great community, and everyone's very like open and honest, and there's no shame in talking about, but it was just like everything that 10 years ago I was like, this is what I want. And I was like in this psilocybin experience, and I'm like, yes, wow. And yet I'm still really lonely. And it was like the term that came into my mind was like there's a deeper loneliness. And I realized that it was a deeper loneliness that also included the fact of feeling like, oh, I'm also connected to the universe, and I'm never truly alone because I'm an expression of like the fabric of love that animates all of life. But in between that and everything else that I had in my 3D life, there was this loneliness. And I realized at that point that for a long time I had been talking about how I was sort of situationally polyamorous, and I was interested in exploring a monogamous relationship if it, turned out to feel right, and blah, blah, blah. Where I realized at some point I was like, no, I'm ready now. I realize like that insofar as how I envision my life moving forward with a relationship, I want a partner that is with me day in and day out until the days that we die. It's somebody who is going to fundamentally change me. Like, well, I mean, this is, I mean this in like in a contextual to myself, not necessarily comparative to other people's strength of relationships, but a relationship that I will never recover from its death and will never want to, like if a relationship where when my partner dies, I will never recover, and I won't want to. A relationship with somebody who I can trust will be there in the dying time, in the aging time, assuming that we're both lucky enough to get that far in being human, and that I realized that the way I was conducting myself with my polyamory would never give that to me. And that there was a way I felt on a deeper level call to participate in monogamy that could bring that to me, assuming that, again, if I found the right person and engage myself in that way. And it was a psilocybin experience that said, hey, like, it's there now. You're really ready. Like you're really ready to ask for this, because I was finally ready to feel where that loneliness was now that I had done all this cool work and getting everything else sort of set up. And that very much set the stage for me entering into a relationship that has become monogamous and feels amazing. And I sort of echoing Bruce, I feel no desire. I mean, I feel desire all the time to have sex with all sorts of people, but like I have no real full desire to ever be intimate with anyone other than her. And it was very much psychedelics, psilocybin, that helped me see that was where I was at, what I was ready for.
And I would guess that the journey that you took to get there, James, helped to process through the kinds of internalized shame around that, like what you just said around that I feel desire for other people, but I have no desire to act on that. I think that's huge. For a lot of people who never question monogamy, there remains a lot of internalized shame around our very natural libido and desires and experience. And going back to what Miriam was saying, like all that internalized shame and the externalized shame that we experience from other people when we are expressing our sexuality and our sensuality. I mean, in terms of the question, does psychedelics make you polyamorous? I just laugh every time I think about that. Like they don't make you anything other than who you fundamentally are. And even the word polyamorous, I mean, that's a label to describe a certain way of doing relationships. Are we fundamentally wired for fidelity or promiscuity? I don't know the answers to that. But I think that psychedelics can help. They can help anybody who is wanting to challenge the construct of anything that they were raised with. And so when I talk about patriarchal monogamy, I say, look, there's other kinds of monogamy that are great. There's an egalitarian kind of monogamy where you aren't subscribing to like patriarchal rules and structure. And it sounds like that's the point at which you're arriving at, James, which is beautiful. And I think that you know, I've seen it in my clients. Like a lot of people will come against this struggle where they do want to be polyamorous. They do want to explore relationships in a different way, whether that's communal living or having an extended poly family or being relationship anarchists or doing monogamy in a different way. But they run up against this wall of the old programming, of the old way of doing things that is just so deeply habituated and that is reinforced by popular culture. And when they run up against that wall, the most powerful tool in anybody's toolkit to combat that is to work with psychedelics, to examine, like, well, what are my core beliefs that are active here? What is the shame that I'm feeling around my attractions? What is it that I actually deeply want? And on the counterpoint to that, I do see a lot of psychedelic erotic confusion that comes up in these communities where people will go to places like tantra festivals or music festivals, and they'll have incredible sexual experiences that may or may not involve psychedelics. And there is confusion around the meaning of the experience. So I think back to an experience that I had at a music festival. I was on a beautiful medley of different psychedelics. It was an incredible night for me. I suffer from chronic pain, and that night I had no pain in my body for the first time in years. And I was like slow dancing with a tree in the forest. It was at Shambhala, and it was beautiful. And then I ended up having a sexual experience with a friend of mine who was there, that to this day is one of the most powerful sexual experiences I've had. And he was on psychedelics as well, and it was very beautiful to get to know my friend in that different way. But that experience is meaningless in terms of what it means about our connection, right? He's still a friend, but he's not someone that I have ever pursued as a romantic interest or as anything beyond that. And it was so interesting to sit with the reality that here was this powerful experience that both of us could acknowledge was deep and transformative. And, you know, that feeling of we are communing not only with our own erotic bodies, but each other's erotic bodies, and like the eroticness of the whole universe. And yet that's the totality of it. We don't have to turn that experience into meaning anything else. And I see that that's not a way that most people will integrate it. I see a lot of relationships appear from festivals, and people have that intimate experience and they become intoxicated with it. And especially when psychedelics are involved, there's an added layer of confusion, because we do feel that unity, we do feel that oneness, we do feel suddenly our attachment needs are being met in our experience with this person, supported through the psychedelics. And yet when we come off of the psychedelic journey, what is there actually remaining between the two people or three people or however many people? So like I've had incredible experiences of using psychedelics in my own exploration of my sexuality, my eroticism, and my relationships. And I remain very cautious about it, because I think that there's a wide margin of error in terms of how we integrate from those experiences. And part of what I hope to see happen in the world is more tools for people to be able to integrate authentically and understand their experiences better.